Dear audience, this is Statistical and Geospatial Insights YouTube channel. Today, we are meeting in lesson number 3, which is about observation and variables. At the end of this lesson, you shall be able to define observations and variables. You should also be able to discuss the difference between observation and variables. What is an observation? The word observation is not a new word for you. You might have come across this word in several occasions in statistics. An observation can be defined in a very simple way as a fact or figure we collect about a given variable. It can be expressed as a number or as a quality. An observation in statistics is a value of something of interest. What is or what are variables? The word observation and variables, they go together. A variable is any characteristics, number, or quantity that can be measured or counted and controlled in a research or in any experiment. A variable may also be called as data or data item. A variable is called so because the value may vary between data units in a population and may change in value over time. For example, income is a variable. Your income can change depending on the situation and so forth. Therefore, by looking at the table in the slide, you have variables. The variables are the names of persons, whereas their age here correspond to the observation. John is 34 years old, so 34 years is an observation. Mary is 28 years, 28 is an observation, whereas Mary is a variable. David is 45 years old. David is a variable, whereas 45 is an observation. Angelo is a variable, whereas his age, which is 41 years old, is an observation. Morris is a variable, whereas his age, which is 24 years old, is an observation. You remember how we classify data types? We use the same to classify variables. Qualitative variables are nominals. These are the names, such as gender, for example, a class of people, or a class of things. Ordinal. So qualitative variable could be nominal or ordinal. Quantitative variables are discrete or continuous. So in any research, based on the interaction between the variables, variables are classified as independent variables and dependent variables. The independent variables are the variables that are manipulated or are changed by researchers and whose effects are measured and compared. It is the variable that can influence the other variable, which is the dependent variables. Therefore, the dependent variable is something that depends on the other factors. Other names for independent and dependent variables in the field of health. Independent variables are sometimes called exposure variables, whereas dependent variables are called outcome variables. Independent variables are known as control variables. Dependent variables are called controlled variables. Independent variables are called explanatory variable, whereas dependent variables are also known as explained variable. Manipulated variable is another name for independent variable, whereas the dependent variables in the field of health is called response variables. There's another type of variables called intervening variables. This is a hypothetical variable used to explain causal links between other variables. For example, wealth can prolong one's life. So wealth is independent variable that can influence the health of a person to live longer. However, if that person who has wealth does not have access to quality health care, that person may not live longer. So access to quality health care is called intervening variables. Another variable that usually beginners in research do not understand the meaning is called the control variables. A control variable is anything that is kept constant during an experiment. For example, we have in an experiment to look at the effect of fertilizer on plant growth. A scientist wants to test if a new fertilizer improves plant growth. The scientists get two identical pots where the plants are put, and the same type and amount of soil for each plant. Both plants are placed in the same room and receive the same amount of sunlight and water. However, one plant, that is the experimental group, is given the new fertilizer, while the other plant was not given or did not receive the fertilizer. After a month, the scientists measure the height of both plants to see which one grew taller. Therefore, variable in experiments are divided into independent variable and the dependent variable. In the experiment that we have just seen, the dependent variable is the fertilizer that can influence the growth. Therefore, the dependent variable is the plant growth, whereas control variables are those things which are kept constant for both type of soil, amount of soil, and type of plant. In conclusion, understanding your variable and knowing the interaction and the relationship between the variables is very important in an experiment. And this information should be known by any person doing an experiment, especially those who are still starting or getting engaging on experiment. This relationship between the variables, that is the dependent and dependent variables, must be known before embarking on an experiment. Thank you a lot to attend and participate in this lecture or lesson. Merci beaucoup. Danke schön. See you in the next lesson.